Since the end of their teenage years, the Beatles had been working non-stop. When they weren't on stage, they were in the studio. When they weren't recording, they were writing.
John and I would write the songs the week before the studio. Brian would ring us up, Brian Epstein, he'd say, "You're in the studio next week, you've got a week off." He'd say, "But you've got to write the album."
They'd run a single every 3 months, and we'd have to be writing literally in the hotel or in a van.
When they weren't doing any of that, they were promoting themselves, sometimes doing odd things. It never let up. There were no days off. By 1966, they had reached a critical midpoint in their career. John, Paul, George, and Ringo needed a break from the business of being Beatles. Something had to change. Something would change.
It had been 4 years for us of legging around in this mania. And we were tired, we needed a rest.
And the idea of being a rock and roll musician sort of suited my talents and mentality, and the freedom was great. But then I found that I wasn't free. I'd got boxed in. It wasn't just because of a contract, but the contract was physical manifestation of being in prison.
But it became a terrible prison for them because all they could do was to go to the concert and then go back to their hotel room and be locked in. They had no life at all, just the four of them, and no one knows what kind of a life it was except those four themselves.
We had the whole floor in the plaza, and the four of us ended up in the bathroom just to get a break from the incredible pressure.
In the eye of the storm, there was little time to reflect, explore, or develop creatively. There was little room to pursue independence of thought or personal growth.
Every minute of the day, someone wanted something. Drive to EMI to do a record, down here to Soho to do a photo shoot, drive back to do some TV show, drive to Birmingham to do a gig, end up in a nightclub. We were just doing 4 or 5 things a day.
We were an entity, Paul admitted. The Beatles operated as a unified force.
This band was they were like a single person. It was an odd phenomena, in fact. They seemed to move together and think together. It was almost like a little family unit.
The Fab Four. John, Paul, George, and Ringo. The four-headed monster. They never went anywhere alone at this point.
Since their big breakthrough, they had maintained the image of lovable guys in matching suits, singing, almost always, to the fans themselves.
It's like, love me do. P.S. I love you. She loves you. Oh, by the way, this is from me to you.
Right.
Oh, thank you, girl. So it's all very directed at the fans. We're doing it for the girls kind of thing, basically.
Right.
But in the early days, we didn't count lyrics at all. As long as it had some vague theme, she loves you and he loves him and they love each other. It was the hook and the line and the sound that we were going for.
And then we started to realize that we didn't have to do that.
Right.
That we could go to other subjects. So it broadened out a bit,
We can't go on forever as 4 clean little mop-tops playing She Loves You.
With the release of Rubber Soul on December 1965, their chart-oriented pop was already shifting towards songs that were harder to classify. They weren't just love songs for the fans.
I'd spent 5 hours that morning trying to write a song that was meaningful and good, and I finally gave up and lay down, and nowhere man came, words and music, the whole damn thing.
John, in particular, was more introspective in his songwriting. His married life in the suburbs was a period marked by domesticity, isolation, and growing personal frustration.
No, I don't know how the hell I got to Norwegian, the actual title. I'd always had some kind of affairs going, so I was trying to be sophisticated in writing about an affair, but in such a smokescreen way that you couldn't tell whether it was real or it was another Beatles story about she loves him and he loves it.
He expanded even further on themes like universal love and existential angst.
In my life was, I think, my first real major piece of work. Up till then, had all been sort of glib and throwaway. And it was the first time I consciously put my literary part of myself onto the lyric.
Meanwhile, George Harrison found something that would pull at him for the rest of his life.
Well, actually, during the filming of Help, there was some Indian musicians in a restaurant scene, and I kind of messed around with the sitar then.
Around that period, when we were all getting into various different kinds of music, and George's became Indian.
I kept hearing the name of Ravi Shankar. I heard it about 3 times. And about the 3rd time I heard it, it was some friend of mine who said, "Oh, have you heard this person, Ravi Shankar?" So I went out and bought a record, and that was it. It felt like it felt very familiar to me to listen to that music.
George embraced Indian music and Eastern spirituality and initiated a profound journey that fundamentally transformed his worldview.
At the height of it all was the thing where I got involved with India anyway, and for me it was the meditation. Meditation was the key to releasing all the anxieties and frustrations.
While his bandmates settled into quiet, married lives in the suburbs, Paul McCartney fully embraced the avant-garde London scene, immersing himself in the city's vibrant underground culture.
When John was married to Sin, he was fixed up with a very nice house in Weybridge in Stockbroker Belt. He used to go home to the wife, and it was a fairly conventional existence, while Paul was staying in town and went to live with a family, the Asher family, in Wimpole Street. And he was at the centre of London art.
This whole scene was together in London, basically. So you would go to a club like the Establishment. You would meet painters and sculptors. And so you could have these great conversations which widened your horizons all the time.
He absorbed new ideas that would transform the Beatles' recordings and ultimately bridge the gap between avant-garde and popular music.
You go around to see Peter Blake or go around to see Richard Hamilton, and just hanging with them, it gave you a new perspective, which then we were able to put into our work.
They were all increasingly becoming individuals with unique interests instead of the four-headed monster.
We were all expanding in all areas of our life, opening up to a lot of different attitudes.
And running beneath all of it was one shared current. In 1965, John and George had been given LSD for the first time.
When we took the notorious wonder drug LSD, it was we didn't know we were having it. John and I had this drug, and it was given. We were having dinner with our dentist, and he put it in our coffee and never told us.
And they gave us it, and he was then advising not to leave, and we thought he was all trying to keep us for an orgy in his house, and we didn't want to know.
What happened to me was like it was just like lots of doors in my mind was just flying open, and there was a lot of things which I knew instantly.
After their longest period of inactivity since the final date of their 1965 tour, the Beatles reassembled at EMI Studios on April 6, 1966.
We were just starting to really find ourselves in the studio, what we could do, which was, over just being the 4 of us playing our instruments and the vocals.
They walked into the studio with a handful of songs for a new album. The compositions reflected a drug-induced consciousness. They revealed a growing fascination with Eastern philosophy and with the avant-garde.
We were just really out to extend the music, play the kind of stuff we liked, write the kind of stuff we liked, and it was to evolve into the kind of psychedelic period, I suppose.
They touched themes that went far beyond the boundaries of pop music.
Well, that was the point where you discover you're not actually really paying more money to the taxman than you are. You get so happy that you finally started earning money. And then you find out that, in those days we paid 19 shillings and sixpence out of every pound. You know, that's when there was 20 shillings in a pound, and that was with super tax and surtax and tax and stuff. And, you know, it was ridiculous, a heavy penalty to pay for making money.
Taxman is the first Beatles song to openly address politics. George Harrison, who was highly anti-war, was angered that his massive tax deductions were being used by the government to finance military weapons.
You can't take the taxes down because they haven't got enough money, and they'll never have enough money while they're buying all that crap like F-111s.
For the first time, Paul McCartney wrote a song from the perspective of a detached third-person observer, a sharp departure from the usual I, me, you love song formula. It would mark one of his major creative milestones.
Eleanor, Rigby. The song itself was consciously written to evoke the subject of loneliness. Those opening lines, Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. It's a little strange to be picking up rice after a wedding. Does that mean she was a cleaner? Someone not involved, someone not invited to the wedding, and only viewing the celebrations from afar? I wanted to make it more poignant than her just cleaning up afterwards, so it became more about someone who was lonely. Someone not likely to have her own wedding, but only the dream of one.
In I'm Only Sleeping, John put himself on the page.
That's me, dreaming my life away.
The theme was rooted in his drug use at the time. Words like dreaming and floating upstream became code for the hazy, distracted headspace of dropping acid or relaxing with a marijuana joint.
John got a school of tape of the rough mix of the backing track to I'm Only Sleeping. And he didn't realize because the tape was tails out. And they just stuck it on a reel, and he put it on his tape machine and threaded the tail in forward and got it backwards. That's when he came in the next day and said, oh, yeah, backwards. And then we made him turn the tape over, play it backwards, and we all played, I think John and I, or Paul and I, played guitars, just like random notes on the guitars. And then we turned the tape back over to see what we had. And that was like the first time we had a backwards solo.
The first song they started working on at the session was a complete departure from anything they'd done. In fact, it was unlike any pop song anyone had heard.
And it was on Revolver that, of course, we have the track Tomorrow Never Knows, which was a great innovation.
It was John's song that he'd done after having read Timothy Leary's take on Tibetan Book of the Dead. And so it was very far out, you know, it was very poetic, very ancient and trippy.
I gave it a throwaway title because I was a bit self-conscious about the lyrics of Tomorrow Never Knows, so I took one of Ringo's malapropisms to take the edge off the heavy philosophical lyrics.
What is that? Tomorrow Never Knows.
I mean, there was different things going on, different influences at the time, one of them being avant-garde, you know, Stockhausen. And it was a very much experimental thing, and all that was a number of experimental things that all came together on the one song.
I brought in a bunch of tape loops in a little plastic bag that I'd done at home, and I just made a lot of the loops that I liked, you know, and brought them all in, literally little pieces of loop tape. And we got them all on 8 or so machines with everyone holding a loop and a pencil or a bit of a glass and stuff, and got them running around on the machines and then fed them all into the desk and made a little mix.
For the Beatles, the Revolver recording sessions represented an artistic liberation and a period of self-education. They realized that the studio was a limitless playground.
We were having more fun in the studio. It was getting more experimental. The songs were getting better, more interesting.
And then they had to go back out on tour.
Then we were back on the road. We got on a train and went up to Hamburg.
By then, I don't think we wanted to be anywhere. It was like automatic pilot, you know.
It was so much more pressure from the press trying to get at you.
What do you plan to do when the bubble bursts?
We're gonna have a laugh.
Everywhere we were going, it was a demonstration of one thing or another. In Japan, people were demonstrating because the Budokan was supposed to be a special spiritual hall and only reserved for martial arts, not pop music. And as soon as we got there, it was bad news.
It was one of those places where you sort of knew they were waiting for a fight, you know.
It was a negative, very negative vibe the moment we got off the plane.
In the Philippines, they feared for their safety after failing to appear at a presidential palace visit they had never actually agreed to.
And so consequently set the mob on us and tried to beat us up, which they did. They beat up a lot of people in with us and wouldn't let the airplane leave Manila until Starr, our manager, had to get off the plane and give back the money that were under the canisters.
Hello, John. Are you looking forward to the tour?
Yes.
Now, this religious controversy, I know you don't want to say too much about it, but does it worry you that it's going to boil up when you get to the States?
Well, it worries me, yes, but I hope everything will be all right in the end, as they say.
The quote which John Lennon made to a London columnist more than 3 months ago has been quoted and represented entirely out of context.
You know, but I'm not saying that we're better or greater or comparing us with Jesus Christ as a person or God as a thing or whatever it is. You know, I just said what I said and it was wrong or was taken wrong, and now it's all this.
The repercussions were big. I mean, there was particularly what they call the Bible Belt. You know, these down the south, they were having a field day.
The last US tour was tainted by controversy, threats, and chaotic concert conditions.
Look, if we've got to back some of the people up, there's been 2 kids crushed already, they'll have to cancel the show. Down, everybody down, or no show. The Beatles want to perform for you, but they can't do it. If you don't sit down now, let's sit down.
Now, I think the craziness was going on in the world and in the band. You know, we were kind of normal and the rest of the world was crazy.
Touring had become a nightmare.
You know, the Beatles became like an excuse for everybody to freak out.
From the Cleveland Stadium, there's been absolutely riot. The crowds have gone berserk, and we've managed to get the Beatles in safely. And I'm sure that whole show's going to stop now. The police couldn't control them, they broke the barriers, and very luckily we managed to get the boys inside after a tremendous riot here.
By the time we got to Candlestick Park, I think we knew now, yeah, sure, you know, this wasn't fun anymore. I think that was the main point. And, you know, we'd always tried to keep, you've got to really try and keep some fun in it for yourself.
It felt dangerous, you know, because everybody was out of hand and out of line. Even the cops were out of line. You know, they were all just caught up in the mania. You know, it was like they were in this big movie, and it was like we were the ones trapped in the middle of it while everybody else was going mad.
So by then it was like, yeah, well, don't tell anyone, but this is probably our last gig.
I certainly felt that that was it, you know, that we weren't going to tour again like that. I never really projected into the future. I was just thinking this is going to be such a relief to, you know, to not have to go through that madness.
That's when we decided to stop in '66, to go into the studio where we could hear each other and create any fantasy that came out of anybody's brain.
In one way it was good because we went into the recording scene and really sort of expressed ourselves through the records then.
I don't think that it's wonder that any of them after that took what you might call long vacations. Paul did in fact write a film score. George did go to India several weeks, and John did make a film. And even Ringo wanted the time just to spend, to contemplate.
Before the Beatles in 1966, there was no precedent for a successful pop group retiring from live performances to focus on making records.
They got tired of touring, and they didn't really see the need for it. They wanted to spend more time in the studio, and they wanted to spend more time living a life, which they didn't have individually.
We were losing our music, and we were getting more and more fame, but we were losing our souls, really. And we just quietly said to ourselves, we won't tour, we won't tell anyone, but let's get in the studio. We'll make a record, we'll send that out. It'll be the same. People will be able to hear where we're up to.
I just want to carry on progressing with music, writing more and just learning more about it. I've written so many songs that I've just thrown away as I've been writing them because I've wanted, when I've finally recorded one of mine, I wanted it to be, worth putting on the LP alongside Paul and John.
In a certain period in our career, we were sort of particularly nice. We had like a very all-round appeal. It wasn't put on, we were more like that. But as we've grown up, you become more individual.
The Beatles were already a commercial success, but by 1966, they had become something more, a force reshaping culture itself.
And so my picture of it now is there was a ship going to discover the new world, and the Beatles were in the crow's nest, and we just said, land ho, right? And that's it. So we were part of it, then we contributed whatever we contributed. And so we were all on this ship in the 60s, our generation, and we went somewhere. Our movement, whatever it was, rock and roll or whatever you call it.
1966 was a year of change, where the Beatles went from being performers to being artists. From then on, they had only one direction to go: